Welcome back to the channel. This will be my team selection for Matchday 1. On screen you can see Benfica's predicted lineup, and I will be showing all the updated versions in the deadline stream only 1 or 2 hours before the deadline, which is at 12 AM UK time. But it's worth mentioning a few things. So Angel Di Maria will play for Benfica in this tournament. Then he will join his boyhood club, Rosario Central. And one other aspect which I talked about is Monterrey and their manager at the time, Martin Demichelis, but he has been sacked. In fact, it was last month, so there could be a few changes to these formations and also with new signings. Man City, for example, we could see some of them incorporated into the starting 11 for Matchday 1, and the same goes for recently returned players from injury like Rodri. So keep your eyes peeled for that deadline stream for the updated graphics and the updated versions of those lineups, which I discussed in that predicted lineups podcast. And there's a lot more headed your way, of course, not only the deadline stream, but team selections and best wildcard teams for every single match day. I also discussed the best budget players, several different drafts, the chip strategy guide, and also how to play Club World Cup Fantasy. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also the notification bell so you never miss a single upload or live stream for FPL, UCL Fantasy, and the Club World Cup. Check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, for likes to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, Club World Cup Fantasy League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. Let's try to get this video in particular to over 200 likes. Thank you very much for all your support throughout this tournament so far, and for UCL Fantasy and FPL over the years. I've also covered the likes of the Euros and the World Cup in the past, and this will be another one to add to the collection. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Over the past couple of weeks, I've made several drafts for Club World Cup Fantasy, and I made key changes from those drafts to this team selection now, and one of them is Di Gregorio back to my first ever goalkeeper pick in Jan Sommer, and that first draft video was made before the Champions League final essentially, so going back to Jan Sommer might seem a bit awkward, especially with Inzaghi leaving Inter Milan. We could also see a formation change very soon, but I think this is an upgrade, and whilst Di Gregorio has very low ownership, he doesn't classify for under 5%, which will mean scouting bonus, so a Juventus clean sheet would mean that Di Gregorio gives you 2 additional points. But if before the Matchday 1 deadline, that ownership does dip below 5%, I would be very interested in going back to him once again. But in UCL Fantasy, I have to admit, Di Gregorio burnt me several times this season, and Jan Sommer, more often than not, was a reliable pair of hands. But buying him in Matchday 17 of UCL Fantasy for the Champions League final was a mistake, because that meant I benched Donnarumma in that 5-0 win for PSG. Next up is Denzel Dumfries to Gvardiol, so essentially I'd be swapping Dumfries and Jan Sommer for my Inter Milan defensive coverage, but even Gvardiol isn't fully secure in my lineup, because I could also go to the likes of Hakimi, who I'll discuss later on. He is one of the most informed wingbacks in Europe, and whilst Gvardiol got an assist for Croatia recently, I still think his attacking threat might be diminished, especially with the arrival of Reine Nuri from Wolves. So I think Man City are one of many teams that have made so many big signings, and in this Club World Cup, we could see them make multiple changes between every single match day, especially in the group stages. But the other position that's really important is the midfield. So Adeyemi to Doué, they're both similarly priced, and of course they have been very impressive in recent Champions League campaigns. Adeyemi when Borussia Dortmund reached the final, and Doué scored a brace and got an assist in that 5-0 win against Inter Milan. He is classified as a midfielder in this game, and the price tag is substantially more expensive because he's 8.2 million here, and in UCL Fantasy he was always under 5 million. But let's now discuss a forward change, which is Kylian Mbappe out for Guirassy, but that doesn't mean Mbappe won't be in my team for Matchday 1, as I'll talk about very soon. But I think Guirassy offers exceptional value, and he's still ranked quite highly in terms of the goal scorer odds for Matchday 1, and that's arguably Borussia Dortmund's toughest game throughout the group stages, because I look at their opponents in Matchdays 2 and 3, and I think Guirassy could get braces and hat-tricks against those respective opponents, but so can Kylian Mbappe, who has scored in 8 consecutive games, so it's very difficult to part ways with him, which is why I'm not doing that, because I could be offloading Messi as my 12th man and going for Kylian Mbappe. This is something I discussed in my latest draft, and I could include other premiums into this equation and keep Messi and Kylian Mbappe simultaneously, but my current plan is to offload Messi completely. He won't be in my starting 11 or as my 12th man. That could be a mistake against Al Ahly in Matchday 1. but Inter Miami have been very poor this season, as covered in my predicted lineups video, and that's where I discuss every single team, their standings in their respective divisions, how they're doing in the continental and intercontinental tournaments. So it's very important, I think, to discuss those aspects of Club World Cup fantasy whilst also discussing players like these two, their form, their stats, and what they're offering both club and country, and let's see if they can translate that into this tournament. But let's now discuss my starting 11, which is provisional, of course, because I will lock it in during that deadline stream. But in goal, I'm going for Franco Armani once more. He is featured in every single draft, and with good reason. He has kept 10 clean sheets in 18 league games, so that's a minor correction to what I discussed in some of my draft videos with the clean sheet stats for the Argentinian league, and he made 48 saves in that spell. He also produced 2 clean sheets in 6 matches in the Copa Libertadores, which is the equivalent of the Champions League in South America, but he only made 5 saves in that tournament, and River Plate have only kept 2 clean sheets over the past 10 games, but at 4 million with some pretty decent fixtures in the group stages, I think Armani offers exceptional value at 4 million, and the ownership is only rising. It's currently at 15.1%. It could even go to 20% by the time we reach that Matchday 1 deadline. But facing Aurora Red Diamonds in Matchday 1, followed by Monterrey, I think River can keep 1 or 2 clean sheets over those specific games, and then facing Inter Milan, anything that Armani can do in Matchday 3 would be a bonus. But let's now discuss the defenders, and I'm going for a back 3, but it's all about the dates that your players play in. So those featuring later on in the match day on the 18th and 19th of June, have them on your bench and make sure that every 15th of June player is in your starting 11, just like UCL Fantasy, the Euros, and the World Cup. But I've got Stanisic here once more, and he has a differential way of covering that Bayern Munich defence. With Dyer leaving for Monaco, Kim Min-jae out injured for the entire tournament, and Upamecano missing the group stages, Stanisic should be a clear starter. But I did mention that Eric Dyer transfer to Monaco. That could happen in the early days of July, and I think he could feature in the group stages for Bayern Munich, so we could still see Dyer feature in this tournament, but I think Stanisic will be locked in for that Bavarian defence until the likes of Kim Min-jae and Upamecano return, and even in the case of the South Korean, he is also heavily linked with a move away from Bayern Munich. But in terms of Stanisic's statistics, what a tongue twister that is. The Croatian started 9 Bundesliga games as well as 4 Champions League matches, and he only got 2 assists in the league, but he can play as a centre-back and on the right-hand side, and for the Bavarians he is playing as a centre-half, and for Croatia he started as a right-back in that 7-0 win versus Gibraltar. Now he only cost 4.9 million, so he's not technically a budget defender, but he is medium priced, and the ownership is 3.9%. Check out my How to Play Club World Cup Fantasy Guide, but there is a rule which indicates that any player with less than 5% ownership, they will score 2 additional points for your team if they get a base score of more than 4 points. So if Bayern Munich keep a clean sheet and Stanisic plays more than 60 minutes, he will give you not just the 5 points for a clean sheet and 2 for the appearance, making it 7, but 2 additional points on top of it. So that will be 9 points, assuming he doesn't get a yellow card or concedes a penalty or something stupid like that. So that's where the appeal of these differential players really comes into play, especially in that defense. I think that's the best area of the pitch to invest in low-owned players for the scouting bonus. And next up is Francisco Moura, who unfortunately doesn't qualify for that particular metric, but he does have a very low price tag at 4.1 million and an exceptional record from left wing back with 2 goals and 5 assists over the past 10 matches for Porto. He has also been booked twice in that spell, but it's not too shabby in my opinion. And over the course of the season, he has got 10 assists, 3 goals and 11 clean sheets across 30 games in the Portuguese league. And the 25-year-old was only booked twice in that competition as well. But his record in the Europa League wasn't as impressive, with 1 clean sheet, 1 assist, and 1 goal in 9 matches. But that 4.1 million price tag is what really makes him stand out, and he has 13.3% ownership. So he's not a template pick, but he's also not a differential. He lies right in the middle, and he faces Palmeiras in Matchday 1, then Inter Miami in Matchday 2, and Al Ahly is arguably the best fixture they have in the group stages, but I think Porto are the best team in that particular group, and despite some inconsistent form at times, I still think they're a solid team overall. But this final defender in the starting 11 is Svensson, who is a differential, but only just 4.7% ownership. If he does reach 5% and over, that's where he becomes less appealing, and I will look elsewhere before that deadline. So I think a lot of these streams could be quite hectic in terms of seeing ownership figures rise, and then you might change things, especially on a wild card or with unlimited transfers in match days 1 and 4. But Svensson produced 1 goal and 3 assists over the last 5 Bundesliga matches, and Borussia Dortmund won all of them and also kept 2 clean sheets over the last 3 games. But Svensson only started 8 games throughout the season, and he averages 66 minutes per game, so that isn't particularly impressive, and he could be a minutes concern, a bit like DeMarco from UCL Fantasy. He does take corners for Borussia Dortmund and offers decent attacking potential, and he started for Sweden in their wins against Hungary and Algeria. The main appeal, though, is that low ownership to qualify for the scouting bonus, and he also has a decent price tag at 5.3 million. But an even cheaper way of covering that Borussia Dortmund defence would be with Ryerson, the other wing back, but Svensson has the corners and a bit more attacking threat from open play, and the fixtures are quite solid overall, facing Fluminense, Mamelodi Sundowns and Ulsan HD. Let's now move on to the midfielders though, which is very interesting. I don't think it's the strongest position in this game. The forwards is where you have a lot of excitement and premiums to choose from, but Elise might be the very best midfielder, especially for matchday 1 facing Auckland City, and he's also in exceptional form, producing a goal and an assist over the last 4 games for Bayern Munich. He also scored versus Germany in a 2-0 win there for France, and the last time he blanked at club level was in a 2-2 draw against Inter Milan back in April. The Frenchman produced 12 goals and 15 assists in an impressive debut campaign for Bayern Munich, with 7 goal contributions across 14 Champions League appearances, and his ownership is quite high, but it has gone down from recent videos. It's currently at 37.2%, and apart from Auckland City, Bayern Munich will face Boca Juniors and Benfica. I think those 2 opponents could be quite tough, but the Bavarians will be the heavy favourites across all of those matches, especially in matchday 1 against Auckland City. And in terms of the clean sheet probabilities, they're through the roof. The goal scorer odds, Harry Kane and Elise, are right up there, but I think he's got the potential of goals and assists in any given game. The same could be said about Imam Shaw, who only costs 4.7 million, and he's a massively template pick with over 30% ownership. He has 4 goals and 4 assists over the past 10 matches for Al Ahly. He even scored a penalty during that period. And after starting 23 Egyptian League matches, Shaw averages 87 minutes per game, so he's quite nailed on in that side. And with 13 goals, 7 assists, and 2 penalties won, and let's not forget, every penalty earned gives you 2 additional points, even if it's missed by the penalty taker. That is really impressive numbers, especially for that 4.7 million midfielder there. And I think he could really translate this to the Club World Cup. In the CAF Champions League, he got 5 goals and 2 assists in just 8 starts in that competition, and he faces Inter Miami, Palmeiras and Porto in that order. But Mastantuono is yet another budget midfielder, and the other one you'd really be looking at is Rodrigo Mora from Porto. But the Argentine was linked to PSG. He is moving to Real Madrid after this tournament ends, but he will play for River Plate in match days 1 to 3, and if they go through to the next round, he will still be there for the Argentine side. And he also became the youngest debutant in the Lionel Scaloni era for the Argentinian national team, as Argentina defeated Chile 1-0. And the promising playmaker started every Copa Libertadores match so far this season, scoring twice and earning a penalty, and he has shown incredible consistency for a 17-year-old with 8 goal contributions in 12 league games, and on top of that, he's now on penalties, so there is so much to like there with Mastantuono, who has become a template pick with 20% ownership, but he only costs 4.3 million, so I think a lot of people are going in the right direction. So River Plate, as mentioned before, have some pretty promising fixtures over the first 2 match days, then it's quite tough against Inter Milan, and we don't know what to expect from them with their new manager, and several teams throughout this competition, like Boca Juniors and Monterrey, will have new managers, and the same goes for Al Hilal, where Inzaghi will now be taking over there. So that should be quite exciting. New players in the transfer window, also new managers and formations and systems, so this could definitely be quite fun and chaotic at times, especially with different rules like the scouting bonus. But next up is Doué, who has very high ownership as well. It's over 25%. He only has 2 goals and 3 assists over the past 10 games, but all of them came in PSG's last 2 matches, which were finals. So in the Coupe de France final, Doué got 2 assists, and as mentioned earlier, he got a brace and an assist, so 3 goal contributions in a Champions League final against Inter Milan. The Frenchman delivered 5 goals and 3 assists in UCL Fantasy over 16 games, but in Ligue 1, the numbers weren't as impressive. He only started 18 out of 31 matches, and he got 6 goals and 6 assists. He played versus Spain and Germany recently in the Nations League, but didn't play particularly well. But he's a young player with a lot of potential, and he's been very impressive for Paris Saint-Germain, who will be without Ousmane Dembele throughout the group stages. So the standout attacker, in my opinion, would be Doué, especially in terms of value, but the likes of Kvaratskhelia, Barcola if he's fit, and I believe he will be for Matchday 1, and if not, Gonzalo Ramos, they're all viable, but Doué is my favourite midfielder from PSG in the Club World Cup. Now going on to the 5th and final midfielder, it is Aktürkoğlu from Benfica, and he was covered in UCL Fantasy, especially during the league phase where he was very impressive. He got 4 goals in 11 matches in that competition, and over the international break he scored for Turkey versus the USA in a 2-1 win, and he has similar numbers to Doué overall, with 3 goals and 2 assists over the past 10 matches, and in 30 Portuguese league games Kerem secured 11 goals and 9 assists, and with less than 5% ownership, the Turkish winger qualifies for the scouting bonus, which is very enticing to say the least, and is a medium-priced midfielder with a 7.2 million price tag. The fixtures overall are quite promising for the first 2 match days, facing Boca Juniors and Auckland City, but against Bayern Munich, I try to avoid him if possible, and one strategy I discussed in that chip strategy guide is actually wildcarding quite early in either match day 2 or 3, so be sure to check that out if you haven't already. It would be quite a similar sort of way of playing as I did in the World Cup. The same goes for the 12th man and other chips like the Maximum Captain, formerly known as the Power Captain chip. But finally, let's go to the forward line where I've got Harry Kane and Guirassy, 2 excellent Bundesliga strikers. And what more can we say about Kane at this point? He has scored in his last 6 appearances for both club and country with 7 goals over the last 10 matches. He scored in both games for England versus Andorra and versus Senegal, where England actually lost that game. But Kane was pivotal in Bayern Munich's Bundesliga title. He got 26 goals, 8 assists, and 2 penalties earned in just 31 matches. And he also got 13 goal contributions in the Champions League. He was the joint 3rd highest goal scorer as well. And no player scored more goals than Harry Kane since he joined Bayern Munich, as covered in my recent podcast. His ownership is quite stable at 41.2%, and with that 11 million price tag, he is the joint highest and joint most expensive player in the game. Facing Auckland City in matchday 1, I can see why some people refer to him as essential, but there are different ways of playing this. The same goes for any fantasy game, and I think the likes of Elise or maybe a differential like Gnabry could be the difference makers, and my favourite would actually be Coman if you are looking for that player with very low ownership who can really be a nice 12th man in your setup, or also a 3rd or 4th midfielder in your team. But now let's talk about Guirassy. He hasn't played since the 17th of May, so he's got plenty of rest going into matchday 1, and he has produced 9 goals and 1 assist over the last 10 matches, and that includes a hat-trick against Barcelona in the Champions League. Only Kane scored more in the Bundesliga, with Guirassy scoring 21 goals, and he also provided 2 assists and earned 2 penalties in that competition, while being the joint top scorer of the Champions League with Rafinha. The ownership is actually lower than it was when I first covered him in my first draft. It's 15.5%, and he faces Fluminense, as covered earlier, for matchday 1. And if you look at all of my players in the starting 11, the toughest game would be Atletico Madrid for Doué, but afterwards PSG have some favourable fixtures for the group stages, so you could argue that Doué is avoidable for the first game week of this tournament, and then you can go back to him at some stage later. The same goes for the defenders and other areas of that PSG team. But on my bench, I've got Sommer, Haaland, Gvardiol, and also Cambiasso, who currently qualifies for the scouting bonus, but that might not be the case by the time we get to the matchday 1 deadline. So if he does go over to 5.1% or above, and I think he will do by the time this video is published, I'll probably look to change him, and I'll cover this in my deadline stream very soon. But Jan Sommer, I talked about him in my first draft video, and he is a very solid goalkeeper. He hasn't played since the Champions League final, that 5-0 loss against PSG, but he kept 7 clean sheets in 14 Champions League matches, and he also got 13 clean sheets in 33 Serie A matches. But how will Inter Milan react after the departure of Inzaghi and that heavy defeat in a final? also losing the Serie A title by a single point to Napoli. I think there are a lot of question marks about the team, but we will see how Chivu does. He has a lot of time and experience at Inter Milan, but not as a manager, so interesting times will definitely be ahead, and I still think Sommer is an excellent option at 5.4 million, but the ownership has dropped dramatically. It's still quite high in template at 28.3%, but we were talking about close to 40% ownership when we had the Champions League final on the horizon. I think that has changed the perceptions of Inter Milan as a whole. But Erling Haaland, I think, is a great option. He costs 11 million, and as a 12th man, he is a great pick, but you might also want him in Matchday 2 against Al Ain. But facing Wydad Casablanca this week, I think he's got a great chance of scoring a brace or a hat-trick, and he scored in a 3-0 win versus Italy very recently, and a lot of the other stats I covered in recent videos as well. And with Gvardiol, he actually got an assist in a 5-1 win over Czechia, and he was in my first draft, so you can see all the stats in the Premier League season. I discuss him and other key assets from other teams as well. And in my Predicted Lineups podcast, I cover all the clubs, how they're doing in the league or how they've done in the previous campaign, how they also fared in their competitions like the Champions League and the kind of equivalents from each continent. So there's a lot of value to be had in my other podcasts, but let's discuss the captaincy here. And Harry Kane will be my first captain, and the way it works is like the World Cup from a few years ago. So once Harry Kane has played, I'll be able to change it to one more captain who hasn't featured yet, and it's not like UCL Fantasy where you can pick a captain for every single day within the match day and have 4 opportunities of nailing it on the 15th, 16th, 17th and 18th. And if you're in Europe, some teams will be featuring in Matchday 1 on the 19th of June, which is also the same day that we have the Matchday 2 deadline. So there are a few things that will be quite alien to us, especially a Matchday 1 deadline that features at, 12 a.m. UK time, and every single one will be 1 hour before the first kickoff of the game week. So hopefully that's all clear, but my how to play guide makes it abundantly crystal, and the same goes for the chip strategy video where I discuss every single booster. But my second captain will be Erling Haaland in this setup. So Kane and Haaland will be relied upon as the solid options in the forward line. I think they are above the rest. I think Elise could be a great option, to be fair, as my first captain, and I always encourage you to be differential. And if you ever want to kind of go a bit bold, I always recommend doing it as your first attempt, and if it goes wrong, you can always go to a more secure option, someone more reliable in terms of your backup, so to speak. It's something I always discuss in the Euros, UCL Fantasy and the World Cup as well. But that's not all, because my plan is to also activate the 12th man chip on Kylian Mbappe, and that's where he comes back into the equation, which I discussed in the transfer plan section. So not only would I have this 15-man squad to choose from, make substitutions, take off my lowest scoring players and boost my chances of getting points, I've got 2 captaincy options, to really hone in on, and your final captain will of course have double the points, your original captain will lose the double points, yada yada yada. But I've also got Kylian Mbappe to add to the mix, facing Al Hilal, which won't be easy. I think Real Madrid could struggle a little bit, but Xabi Alonso, yet another new manager, and you've got new signings there at Real Madrid like Dean Howson and Trent Alexander-Arnold. But Kylian Mbappe is in amazing form right now. Like I said before, he has scored in 8 consecutive games for club and country, scoring 12 goals in that spell. He also converted a penalty and provided an assist versus Spain in the Nations League semi-final, and he did something similar against Germany with a goal and an assist, but this time from open play. And he also has become the main penalty taker at Real Madrid, taken over from Vinicius Jr., and he won the European Golden Boot with 31 goals scored, 3 assists and 3 penalties earned in La Liga, and he got a decent tally in the Champions League with 7 goals, 1 penalty earned and 1 assist in 14 matches. The ownership is extremely high though, at 57.7%, and the price tag of course is 11 million, just like Harry Kane and Erling Haaland. And after Al Hilal, he does face Pachuca and Red Bull Salzburg, so you'd probably want Mbappe for those 2 match days, and that's something I need to think about. Maybe I'll just introduce Mbappe back into my squad and pick a different 12th man instead, like Lionel Messi. But my current plan is to go for this sort of structure, because I also like Harry Kane, Guirassy and Haaland in Matchday 2, so that'll be a difficult one, and it's really challenging, I think, to trim it down to just 3 forwards in this game. But that is my current plan. You know my captaincy options. You can't actually captain a 12th man. That's all covered in my how to play guide. But let's now move on to stats, odds, and different aspects of Club World Cup fantasy. Building upon the discussions about the captaincy, let's highlight the goal scorer odds, and all of these stats are taken by fantasyfootballpundit.com. You probably would have seen this in UCL Fantasy as well, but Harry Kane is top for Matchday 1 in terms of the highest goal scoring probability, facing Auckland City, who are the worst ranked team in terms of Opta stats and their power rankings. Vlahovic is second, then we've got Haaland, Mbappe, and Musiala in the top 5, and this is assuming that all of these players will start, and that probably won't be the case. As you can see, Leroy Sané is also on this list, and he's about to complete a move to Galatasaray. Kevin De Bruyne just completed one to Napoli, so there's a lot going on in the background as well, which will make this even more challenging to predict, and also we could have a few curveballs thrown at us between different match days. But those are the goal scorer odds. Feel free to pause, rewind, or go to the website yourself. But next up will be the clean sheet odds, and it's worth highlighting the top 5 as well, which is Bayern Munich, Man City, Juventus, Flamengo, and Real Madrid. But look how high Bayern Munich are. 80% chance of a clean sheet is incredible, and Man City as well at over 70%. That's why Gvardiol is in my squad, right? Let's see if they can deliver. They had a strong end to their Premier League campaign, but Man City lost the FA Cup final, and they had a pretty underwhelming campaign overall, and not all the other teams are ranked in order, or at least you don't see the all 32 teams for Matchday 1 and their probabilities, but you can see a good number of them, probably the ones worth investing in defensively with your goalkeepers and your 5 defenders, but that looks pretty solid overall. And last but not least is the chances of winning this tournament, and Real Madrid are top with a 17% chance of winning the Club World Cup. Then it's Man City, PSG, Bayern Munich, and Chelsea. Hopefully that isn't the case, but yeah, hopefully you aren't offended if you are a Chelsea fan. Then you've got Inter Milan in 6th, Atletico 7th, Dortmund 8th, Juventus 9th, and Flamengo in 10th. But we are getting to kind of very low odds and numbers as you go further down that list. But an interesting top 5. I think it's pretty reasonable to say the least. Maybe Inter Milan should be a little bit higher, but I really think that Champions League final changed the perceptions from a lot of people and also the bookmakers. And not only that, the change of manager from Inzaghi, that could be a big blow, but football is full of surprises. Maybe Inter Milan will have their revenge, and overall it's a pretty decent list. I will show some differentials and the most template picks in my deadline stream. That's something I would like to do as well, but there is also one more thing I want to show you before discussing a few alternatives to my 50-man squad, primarily in the defensive line and the midfield. If you have watched my other content for Club World Cup Fantasy, you have a good idea of all the groups, the fixtures, best assets, differentials, and budget picks, and also some of these graphics I have shown you before anyway, like the power rankings by Opta, and as you can see, PSG are the best ranked team right now. Then you've got Man City, Bayern Munich, Inter Milan, and Real Madrid. But essentially that top 6 is identical to the probabilities of winning the tournament, but you've got a few key changes, like Real Madrid going from 1st to 5th in this sort of ranking. But there's a difference between being the most likely to win something and being the best team overall. But all the 32 participants are ranked in order here by Opta, and I have shown these graphics before in previous videos and podcasts, but I wanted to show you something a little bit different. And of course, this is not going to be it, but just a reminder, we don't have Club Lyon anymore in Group D. They were replaced by Los Angeles FC in Chelsea's group, which also contains Flamengo and ES Tunis. But what I really want to highlight is the FDR, and this contains all the group stage fixtures, and the FDR essentially means fixture difficulty rating. So those highlighted in green are going to be easier games, and those highlighted in red will be difficult games on paper. But you've also got some in between in the sort of yellow bracket, and all of this is courtesy of the website fantasyfootballpundit.com. Go to that website for UCL Fantasy, FPL, and this tournament, and you can see all of them for yourself. But I'll be referring to this from time to time in this tournament. I think will be very helpful to kind of identify the fixture swings, the best time to invest in certain clubs. Boca Juniors, for example, you'd be looking at match day 3, and some teams just have great fixtures throughout the entirety of this group stage here, like Borussia Dortmund, and you could even say Chelsea as well. And some will kick things off very strong, like Bayern Munich, Man City, and Juventus, but a lot of them have also been highlighted in previous podcasts as well. Let's now go to my 15-man squad once more and discuss some possible changes from now until that deadline stream. It's quite clear that people are very bullish on Paris Saint-Germain right now, and one question I keep getting asked is, why aren't you going for Hakimi or going for 2 or 3 PSG players in general? I still think Atletico Madrid could be quite tough in matchday 1, and yes, I thought the same thing for the Champions League final where they demolished Inter Milan, but I still think PSG, they're a great team, probably the best in Europe right now, but I think they have vulnerabilities and they can be beaten, especially without their star striker or attacker in Ousmane Dembele. But Hakimi is in exceptional form right now. He scored in Morocco's victory over Tunisia, which marked his 5th goal over the last 10 games for club and country. He also scored in the Coupe de France final, and guess what? He also scored in the Champions League final as well. And in UCL Fantasy, he delivered 4 goals and 5 assists in 17 appearances, so he featured in every single match day of that tournament. And his numbers in Ligue 1 were similar, with 10 goal contributions across 25 matches as well. His ownership is just under half, 49.2%, and the price tag is quite hefty at 6.5 million. And after Atletico Madrid, PSG will face Botafogo and Seattle Sounders, and that's where I'd be very bullish on PSG, and I'd really like to double or triple up on them for sure. But against Atletico Madrid, I think 1 is probably enough, and going for 2 is still fine. And guess what? A triple up is also a viable choice, but I think I'm going to go for 1 or 2 PSG players in matchday 1, and my favourites right now would be Hakimi and Doué. But if I were to make this move, I would sacrifice Gvardiol, and I would need 0.3 million to make that happen. So downgrading Kemam Ashur to Rodrigo Mora would allow me to have enough money in the bank, and I also would have a little bit left over actually. So that could also work well in upgrading other areas, but it would mean doubling up on Porto, which could be problematic in matchday 1 against Palmeiras, and Porto haven't been extremely reliable in the last couple of games of this season. But I still think Aguilar up front, Rodrigo Mora and Francisco Moura offer exceptional value. Check out my budget players video and all my other content for the full package and coverage of the Club World Cup. But there are still different players that are crossing my mind, and a few things can change from now until that deadline stream, primarily in terms of those eligible for scouting bonus right now who could go up in ownership by the next day or so, and that would mean making even more changes to my final squad. Let's kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If you are unaware of how to play Club World Cup Fantasy, there is the FIFA app, so just download that and you're pretty much set. But if not, just go to my description and there is an auto-join link there. So you click it, you become a part of my league after signing up and making an account with FIFA, and that's how you can access Club World Cup Fantasy. There's also a code, so you can copy that and join very, very easily. So there are different ways of becoming a part of this community. The same goes for the Discord server, X, Instagram and Blue Sky. Those links can also be found there. But if you want to see one more video before the deadline, then let me know down in the comment section below, maybe the best differentials or perhaps an updated lineups video discussing new transfers and a few things to correct here and there, because 32 teams is obviously a lot of research and information and things do change on a daily basis, but I'd be very happy to do one more. And the same goes, of course, for that deadline stream on Saturday night. That should be a fun one going into the early hours of Sunday morning in the UK. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also the notification bell so you never miss a single upload live stream for Club World Cup Fantasy, FPL, and the Champions League. Our aim will be to get this to over 200 likes on YouTube and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 34,000 subscribers. Follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, and all the other links are there. As mentioned earlier, the Club World Cup Fantasy League, Spotify, and much more. I'll see you on Saturday night, so that's going to be very soon, of course, answering all your questions and making sure you're well prepared for Club World Cup Fantasy.